Well, after that wonderful dinner, I'm quite honoured to be standing here and talking to you. I just want to explain one thing before we start, that this presentation was prepared by an accountant and a broker, and I was brought in at the last minute. Please, can you give this presentation? It's not my style, believe me. Okay, I will leave you in your time to go through and have a look at the material in the presentation, but I shall try and talk to the presentation, but I shall use my own interpretation of it. Before we start, Julian, Mount Adra, I think it's probably a great project, and what goes around comes around. When I was with DRD Gold back in 2002 and I arrived in this country, DRD had acquired Dome Resources, and Dome Resources had Tolukuma Gold Mine in Papua New Guinea, but it also had Mount Adra, and it also had some tenements in Daylesford. Well, I tried to convince my South African masters at that time that we should have a look at Mount Adra, but no, they wanted something in Papua New Guinea, so we just let that lapse. And Julian, well done for picking it up and taking it forward. So as I say, what goes around comes around. Crater Gold. As Tim said, it was previously called Gold Anomaly. An anomaly in geology is one thing, but to be called Gold Anomaly on the stock exchange, I think was not a good move. So I'm happy for the change in name, Crater Gold Mining. And we're here to talk about why should you, and I saw the survey done earlier, that a lot of you are retail investors, not necessarily institutional investors. A few institutions, but mostly retail. Why invest in Crater? Crater is a junior company that has its foot on one of the most prospective areas in Papua New Guinea. It has full ownership of what were former Tier 1 BHP tenements before BHP pulled out of the gold exploration business. We have a strategy in place that is going to turn us shortly into a gold producer, and we shall be having cash flow. Beyond that, sitting on this very prospective tenement, we have potentially a very, very large gold deposit, but as you all know, in Papua New Guinea, with the logistics and so on, that these things are timely, they take time and they take a lot of money to bring to fruition. And the strategy that we've adopted is that in this very, very difficult financial market, is whilst everybody else has had to batten down the hatches, we have developed a strategy where we intend to go into very small scale, very low cost, very low capital cost production. And to do that, we have had to go out and find supportive cornerstone investors. And we do have, in that we have a very supportive investor out of Hong Kong who has been following rights issues and so on for the last year. Crater Mountain is our main focus. Crater Mountain has gone through a history of exploration over the last 30-odd years. It started off in the hands of Esso. It went into the hands of BHP. BHP drilled the first 3 holes, and they found signs of mineralization at what we now call the Nevera prospect. From BHP, it went into the hands of Macmin. From Macmin, it went into TPJ, Triple Plate Junction, and from Triple Plate Junction, it has now passed to Crater Gold Mining. It's not an easy place to work. We're in a remote part of Papua New Guinea. We're at 6,500 feet in quite difficult terrain, and the logistics are mainly helicopter supported. We have an airstrip 7 kilometres away, so we do use some fixed wing, but a lot of it is still helicopter supported. And as you see there, we have a good exploration team headed by one of PNG's most successful prospectors. I wouldn't call him a prospector. He is a geologist, and he has been in Papua New Guinea since the mid-60s. He was involved in the discovery of a number of very, very significant gold deposits within Papua New Guinea, including Lihir, and that is Peter McNabb. A lot of you would have met, and a lot of you would know Peter. So what are we wanting to achieve? We want to prove the world-class potential of Crater Mountain. Crater Mountain has the potential to be another major deposit within the gold belt in Papua New Guinea. How do we want to do this? As I've said, we plan initially to go into small-scale production. That small-scale production will make us self-sufficient in this market in terms of funding and capital. And with that, we intend to put the money back into the ground to prove up what we believe is going to become a large world-class deposit. As you see, the terrain is rugged, but it is also quite beautiful when you can see it, because quite often it is clouded and shrouded in mist, but when you see it, it is quite spectacular. And we are located in one of the most prolific orogenic gold zones in the world. We own the tenements 100%. We have a JORC resource. A lot of drilling has been done, and we have really only scratched the surface of a very large tenement or group of tenements that we have. Most of you would have seen a slide like this, which shows why we're in Papua New Guinea. To the west, you start off with Grasberg, 116 million ounces of gold, 41 million tons of copper. Coming east, you've got Oktedi. Some people call it OK Teddy. Not sure why. But anyway, very significant deposit. You've got Mount Frida, which hasn't been developed yet, 18 million ounces of gold, 11 million tons of copper, and so on. And Crater Mountain sits in that belt. And we believe there is every reason to suggest that we have the potential for such deposit. Crater Mountain itself, 3 different styles and zones of mineralization have been identified from drilling. The mixing zone, as we call it, has a JORC resource of 790,000 ounces on it. We have what I am particularly interested myself as a mining engineer, the high-grade zone, and then what we're looking at in the future is the potential for a large porphyry gold copper system lying at depth. These are all situated within what we refer to as the Nevera prospect. The zone of mineralization stretches 1,400 meters roughly in a northeasterly, southwesterly direction, and about 700 metres west to east. And within that, there's the 790,000 ounce resource in what you see there, the yellow outline of what we call the mixing zone. There's a large geophysics anomaly in the blue where a recent Aeromag survey has been carried out, and where we have a couple of deep holes within the mixing zone which suggest that we have the potential for a large porphyry copper. But again, as a mining engineer, what I'm interested in right now is what we call the high-grade zone. The high-grade zone is an area where a trench was dug by TPJ, Triple Plate Junction, back in 2004, 2005, and they reported grades of 10 grams over 50 metres. Well, my first question to management when Crater got hold of me and said, look, can you come and have a look at this, was in the 50 metres, where is the grade? Where is the gold? We looked at the results, and sure enough, you had 2 or 3 or 4 metres grading 50 grams, and the rest was grading 1 or 2 grams. So all the gold was actually concentrated in a few metres. The local community got hold of this information. They came into the area and they mined it as artisanal miners from 2005 until the end of 2012. And we estimate that they took out approximately 15,000 ounces. But what they actually took out in terms of tonnes couldn't have been more than a couple of thousand tonnes, because they were scratching, they were gouging. Their method of recovery was to dolly it, to pan it, to put it over a sluice. They cooked, if there were any sulfides, they cooked the sulfides and then panned and sluiced those sulfides. So from their surface gougings, and when I say surface gougings, one of their gougings we believe went down as far as 50 metres, and we actually have photographs. We sent a camera down with a couple of the guys. They're quite amusing because here are these people barefoot. I mean, we would freak in Australia if we saw these people working underground. Barefoot, no hats. Lights are fluorescent lights which they carry around with them underground. And they took a camera down and photographed what they were doing down there with an electric jackhammer. And yes, they went down 40 or 50 metres. So we said, what can we do in the short term to turn it to our advantage? And the answer was drilling from surface without actually understanding the geology, without understanding what was controlling the mineralisation, wasn't going to give us the answer. So the company approached me in December 2012. We'd like to go underground. So I put together a team. We've now gone underground. We've put an adit in, and the adit was done very, very simply. I've said we don't want any mechanised equipment, etc. in there. In fact, the most mechanised of my haulage equipment to date has been the most expensive Bunnings wheelbarrow that you can get, and local labour. So we've put an adit in 70 odd metres into the hillside. We've cut crosscuts from the adit, and we have found continuations of the type of grades and the type of mineralisation that the locals were finding in their surface scratchings. So we have what we now are delineating, now that we understand it a bit better, with drilling, so that we can plan our development and keep going. We've identified this high-grade zone. The area, we reported to the ASX in November last year a series of results from our underground development, where we intersected bonanza grades, excuse me, of up to 847 grams a tonne. Now, 847 grams a tonne is quite spectacular. That's 27 odd ounces a tonne. When you see it underground, it is very distinctive, coarse, free gold, which in anybody's language is something that you very rarely see in this type of exploration. But it's given us the confidence, and it's told us that we know that what the locals were scratching on surface extends into the underground development that we had. And I now have a drilling program going where we've completed to date 8 holes. We will be publishing some results within the next day or so. And without giving you the results, I'm encouraged by those results, and it's given me the beginnings of a basis to start the detailed planning for my small-scale underground operation. You can see the terrain is very severe. We have the artisanal workings. We've put an adit in. We've cleared an area where we can put a small gold plant. And when I say a small gold plant, Crater, through my connections, has acquired a small gold plant out of Africa, to be more specific, out of Zimbabwe. You might think, well, why do you go and buy a gold plant in Zimbabwe? Well, there's a company in Harare in Zimbabwe who act as the Africa-wide agents for Nelson concentrators. And this company has a wealth of experience in gravity concentration, and they have proprietary technology that they have developed, and they are building small modular plants which they're selling throughout Africa and selling throughout South America. This is the first one that will reach the shore, and it has reached the shore, of Papua New Guinea. I will be flying it to site this week, but what I'm actually trying to put across to you, and what I am putting across to you, is we're not looking at this from a high-tech point of view. We're looking at it from a very small-scale point of view. We're in a remote part of the world. We cannot afford to build a large project where we have to fly all of our gear in. And when I say gear, if we end up going for rubber-tired underground loaders and drill rigs and so on, we'll simply price it out of the market. So what I've done is said we will go in as simply as possible. We'll start production. And when I say start production, we're talking as low as only 1,000 tonnes a month. The gold plant that we've actually purchased and we fly to site has a footprint that will fit into half of this dining room here. The message that I want to get across is that we're moving away. In order for us to sustain our development and our exploration going forward, we have to think as simply as possible so that we can make best use of these very high grades that we're encountering, and in this very tight market provide the working capital that we can then carry out the drilling that will take us forward. As that slide says. I've already mentioned that the local community with very rudimentary means, took out about 15,000 ounces, with grades we think were in the region of an ounce. They're obviously not substantiated, but we have word of mouth, the amounts of cash that were coming into the community, and we've been able to build up a very good picture on that. We have underground development in place that is designed that we will be able to start mining from it. We have very high grades over very narrow widths. And maybe this is a good time just to explain a little bit about the geology. Remember, I'm a mining engineer, but people say that I have a nose for exploration and have a nose for a bit of geology. What we're looking at is an epithermal system. It's regarded as a high sulfidation epithermal system. The very high grades that we're looking at over very narrow widths are demonstrating very intense, they're situated within a zone of very intense brecciation, but you have these very narrow veins, generally about 20 centimetres wide, highly oxidised, but showing features of intense acid leaching. So what that means in real terms with intense acid leaching, that any base metal sulfides that may have been there at the time of formation have been leached. And all that we're left with in situ is free gold, which makes recovery of the free gold that much easier. So we won't have a plant initially, I'm saying, which will involve cyanidation. We will have a very small footprint on the ground. Our environmental footprint will be very small, which makes life a lot easier in trying to get a small operation going. What we're looking at during the first year, once we actually get into production, and in order to do that, we've made application to the Mineral Resources Authority in Papua New Guinea as the agency that looks after these things for a mining lease. We are in consultation with the Mineral Resources Authority, answering their questions, going backwards and forwards. The other agency that we're dealing with is the Department of Environment and Conservation, and we expect to have the approvals for an environmental permit fairly shortly. So as soon as the mining lease is granted, we will actually be able to commission our underground operations and start recovering gold. Currently, we're operating under a variation to the exploration license, which allows us to go underground. It allows us to process bulk samples, but it doesn't allow us to produce gold and to sell the gold. Okay, where does this take us in the future? We want to use whatever proceeds we get from the high-grade zone development and exploitation to put back into the ground to look in the future for a multi-million ounce deposit in what we call the mixing zone. There are also others who suggest that we should be looking at a deep-seated gold-copper porphyry, but that, in my mind, may be a little bit too far-fetched at this stage. So we stick to the objective of proving up a multi-million ounce deposit in what we call the mixing zone. Thank you.